Okay, where did I leave off on this project? Just closing my door real quick. Okay, I want to get this to a finished state as far as a jam entry by the end of this week. I don't really have a game loop. I've got some mechanics. I start with a single bot. I can pick up that bot. It deposits the thing. More bots spawn. Use the whistle ring to call them. And then I can use those bots to do different actions. Eventually I want to have some sort of enemies, threat to the player. But I can spawn bots and I can hit obstacles. I need to add the ship parts. So, ship parts. Need to figure out what these are. I want to have 3. And then I need part collection. So that won't actually go to one of the little collectors that I have set up now. That's going to have to go to a ship that needs to be repaired. Once we have the ship parts and the part collection, then we can do the win condition, which is a separate card that I have down here. Well, I guess I have win cutscene, or win conditions right there. Okay. Win, lose, and intro cutscenes are optional. Those are going to depend on time and on available tokens. If I can do it, I'll try, but I doubt I'll get it done by this week. What I'm hoping to do is have the jam version of this done this week, and then I'll continue work on it because I've got a lot of other things that I want to add to it. Procedural generation is one of the things that I'd really like to get in. Hey Tanner, thanks for stopping in. So cutscenes are going to go down to the bottom. Procedural map generations down at the bottom. I have auto tiling working, so I can just draw different versions of the map. I can add a little cubby here. And then on run, that should be there. So when the game runs, it auto tiles with a simple tile set. That's on this tab here. So these tiles make up the entire map right now. Working on a Swift UI budgeting app. What happened to your text adventure? One thing I just noticed is these bots they're mapping to the wrong position on these crates. They should be jumping to the top center. That was a fun little quirk there. The bots, when they spawn, they pop out at a random position, and there's a chance for them to land close enough to a crate that they actually end up collecting the crate. And I think it's a fun little happy accident that I'm going to leave in. That won't happen now that I want it to. The crates spawn based off of the map tiles also, so I could probably force that by adding a few more of these. Yeah, there we go. And they just start infinitely spitting out more bots. Okay, so there was a bug with bot position when, let's see, bot position when carrying supply. Inconsistent. So we said ship parts. The ship parts need to have ship artwork, or ship entity, we'll say. And then the ship entity needs artwork, ship part interaction, and this will also trigger win condition. So if we collect all the parts, we should get the win condition for the game. That needs to happen above a lot of this stuff. I would love to get music in, but that's not ideal. These cutscene cards can go away because we moved that into one card. We do need the win condition or lose condition. We do need the ship parts. Static map layout is something we need if we're not doing procedural generation, and I think that's going to be the case. So let me just make, I don't know if I can make a divider card in Obsidian. I've never tried. We will say later. Just to give myself a divider. So that's going to be our division there. I would like to get music in before, or in some capacity in this first version. Player health, player respawn. For the player respawn, I'm thinking what I would like to do is just have bots. Once I add enemies, I add a way for the player to take damage. I would like to add bots just sort of flying in, picking up the player and moving off screen, and then you respawn back at a base location. And that would look something like, let's see, open up the artboard for this project. So I originally had some base type buildings that look like these. And I was debating on adding interiors, and that might be something else that I would add in a later version of the game. The ability to go inside buildings and interact with some sort of NPCs. So I'll add building interiors. Tanner says my mic's a little quiet. Let me see. Turned up the gain just a little bit. See if that helps. Okay, what else do we need? So the objective collection, I need to rename objectives to supply. Okay. We don't really have a currency anymore. Okay, so the collection animation is something I still need to add here. Let me undo these map changes. So that collection animation is when these boxes, which I think I'm going to change the artwork for these boxes, this is just temporary. When that gets dropped on that machine, I want it to actually look like the machine is disassembling or absorbing or doing something with that box. And then I had a cable connecting these in the original artwork. I don't know if I drew that on here. Oh yeah, I did. So there was originally sort of a cable connecting those two things, but then I separated them into two separate entities. So now, let's close some of this. There's a collector entity and a spawner entity. So these are two separate things. I still want them connected. And I think I kept a reference. I did right here. Oh, I renamed this. Okay, that's what happened. So this is actually drawing the cable. So So this is just using a sine function here, moving from the position of the collector to whatever spawner it's associated with. And when the collector is instantiated, it instantiates a spawner to its right. I might change this. I think what I eventually want to do is be able to place them each independently on the map and then have a collector just find its nearest spawner and draw a cable to it. Yeah, so there we go. So now the sine function draws a little cable in between these two things. And theoretically, let's clear this part of the map. So if I made a little more space there and I said I wanted to move this to, let's just go another 16 pixels. Yeah, so it should move the spawner a little bit further over. I don't know how that'll work if I change the Y position. Yeah, I think I'm only, oh yeah, I'm only working with the X position here. But I might want to make that, be able to draw at diagonals or maybe use pathfinding even. That might be cool to have it path from square to square, and then it doesn't have to be a direct line. The cable could kind of be laid in an L shape. Obviously not the most important thing to work on right now though. Oh. This weekend I picked up a an RGB 20SX, or it finally got delivered, and I was testing out PICO-8. And oh, it's not on here. I've been switching out which operating system I'm using on this. I was going to show that I had this cartridge running on here, but I think it was actually running on the previous operating system that I was using. So I have this build.p8 reminded me because I created that just to put on that device. So let's see. It's the cartridge. Don't want to do that. Need to just commit a few things that I was working on earlier today. So this was a fix for bots returning to the player after attacking. And that fixes the spawner. That's the start of an animation. I don't want to do that yet. My ZSH theme, I think the last time Tanner, the last time I set up this computer, I just installed Oh My ZSH, and I think this might even be the default theme that it started with. So I could probably look up exactly what it is for you, but I just wanted to not think about my my shell this time around. So I went with the old school Oh My ZSH. That's right. I also fixed, I was trying to do multiple sorting passes to be able to define layers for my sprites and then also Y sort them. And it ended up being easier just to have every entity give itself a, to add a sort value variable and make that the layer times 1,000 plus its Y position. So that let me move from having 2 sort calls, which was not consistent, to a single sort value. And then this was just me testing the spawning. It's actually kind of funny, so I'll implement it again. So I was making it so that I can just hit a button and test the spawn animation. So I can just spam this and have it spit out bots. The performance isn't terrible. I don't know how many I have right now, but I think I can get at least 50 plus spots on the screen at a time, and it still runs all right. I tried spawning 100, and it was a little too slow. Yeah, Tanner asked if I can show the code that does the bot shadow. So actually I have it set up so that any entity can have a shadow turned on. They're false by default. And then I think it's in game. So in my game's draw call, I iterate over all the entities and I call a method called draw shadow. And then draw shadow, there it is. So if the shadow is enabled for the entity, then I get the tile that the entity is on. Am I still using this? This was a test. So originally what I was trying to do is make it so that I only drew tiles or drew shadows on what would be considered floor tiles. So I had a flag that was a floor tile, but that's not needed anymore. Now what I do is I draw the shadows and then I draw the map. And so anything that's black is essentially where a shadow can be drawn. So going back to entity, so then I have a variable shadow scale, and shadow scale is 1 divided by the elevation. In my game, elevation is just what I'm using for how high off the ground anything is. So it's the elevation times 0.5 plus 1. So that always gives me a value of 1 at least, and then elevation is typically 0 to I think 4 or 5 is maybe the highest I move off the ground on any of these. So I might get like 5 times 0.5, so it's 2.5, and then 2.5 plus 1, 3.5. So then I get 1 divided by 3.5. So essentially the numbers aren't particular. I just fiddled with them until it looked how I wanted it to look. But it gives me a fraction of a shadow the higher it moves off the ground. So then the shadow width is the width of the sprite times the shadow scale. So that way I can get an accurate width based off of the sprite. So you can see the little boxes on the ground, they have a shadow being drawn right now because they're sitting against the ground, and as soon as they get picked up, that shadow gets smaller. And then this line is just, let's break this down. So it's the initial X value, the initial Y value, and then the end X value and the end Y value, and then that's the color. So in this case, is shadow always a square, or is it based off the sprite? In this case, it is always a line. So I'm going really simple in this one, just drawing a line. There's another technique that I like that I might explore later. What was it on? It was on an article about circular clipping masks. So this was an article about circular clipping masks. I'll share this in the chat. Yeah, the fact that the shadow is always a line is just sort of a visual trick. Uh-oh. My chat logged me out. One sec, chat's reconnecting. So anyway, this article is all about circular clipping masks, and it breaks down how to do those. But then in the comments, I sort of derailed the conversation, which I apologize for. But my browser zoomed in. Here we go. So I had tested this implementation of shadows that actually it like punches holes through it draws the screen to a separate place in memory, punches holes through it, and then draws the quote unquote shadows as a separate palette. And so that way you could have objects of any shape moving over top of something else drawing shadows. I apologize for 1 sec. I can't see if you're typing anything because I'm having trouble getting back into this. I'll have to log back into that later. Right now, Restream chat's not working for me, but I can see Twitch chat. So if anyone happens to be on YouTube commenting, I can't see it right now. Yeah, this shadow implementation looks really cool. It takes up a little more of the CPU process available in PICO-8. So if I can get away with the static line and color, it's actually better for me and better for the game. But this is something that I'd like to explore later if I can make it work. I'll actually add that. We'll just call that enhanced shadows. And I put the link in Twitch chat to that article also. Yeah, so enhanced shadows are going to be way down there. That's something I would like to explore, but it's not important. But you had asked how the shadow generation works, and yeah, this calculation is just using that shadow width. So getting the scale of the shadow times the width of the sprite, and then dividing that by 2 so that the line is offset from the center of the sprite. So it takes the current X position minus half of the shadow, and then this OX is an offset. I'm using that so that any sprite can have an offset. So for example, when these little bots are attacking something, their actual position isn't changing, but the offset being drawn of the sprite changes. So that way I can give the effect of them moving around attacking something without actually checking collision on their movement. And I think I still have, yeah, I still have the bot spawner in there. We'll expand shadow logic. That can be multi-line. That's no problem. Let's add the spawner. Remove temp bot spawning. Let me just make sure I'm saving this and exporting the sprite sheet. Okay, I think I'm all caught up. Everything's checked in. I've got some plans here in Obsidian. I really want to do the collection animation, but that's not super important right now. I don't have collision on these objects yet either. So right now the player can move right through here. Something else I did off stream was played with a couple different input styles. So right now you use the arrow keys to control the cursor, and the player uses pathfinding to follow the cursor. Pathfinding doesn't take into account entities yet, so right now the player's stuck on that, but the cursor is locked to a certain distance from the player, so you'd have to move the cursor back to move the player around. Eventually I want the player to be able to navigate around that. Let me add that one. We'll call it a bug. Pathfinding doesn't take entity collision into account. But it does work for map collision. So if the cursor moves to the other side of this rock, the player will move to where the cursor is visible. So I should be able to do the same thing for entity collision. I just need to have entities considered in the pathfinding algorithm. And that is, there's an A* pathfinding implementation right here. There's a weird little bug with the pathfinding that I need to figure out. Sometimes he just did it there. The player moves away from the natural path. I have it in the bugs. It's in my Obsidian list here. Yeah, entities will occasionally follow an old path. I don't know if it's necessarily the old path anymore. That was a little bit separate. For a little while, the way that I had this implemented, essentially the player or any entity will use A-star pathfinding if it doesn't have a direct line of sight to its target. And so ideally what happens is it only needs to execute the pathfinding algorithm when it's completely around a corner. And then as soon as it rounds the corner and it can see the object again, then the player will actually go directly towards its goal, or the whatever I'm pathing will go directly to its goal. The same thing happens with these little supply crates that spawn the bots. Hey Anchor, welcome in. Another thing that I want to do in Pikmin, you actually have to activate these spawners. So I'd like to activate the spawner, but I'm concerned about how that works with my control scheme. So if this machine wasn't activated, then it's a little strange to have the player be controlled by this cursor. You could have the cursor come up and, you know, be able to press a button on the machine, and then maybe I animate the player to run over and activate it. I played with some other control schemes where you actually controlled the player directly and then the cursor moved in the direction the player was facing. But that one didn't feel too natural just because PICO-8 only has 8 directional movement. So the cursor was kind of snapping to different directions. I tried lerping the cursor to different positions, but then if you were trying to be very accurate about where you were aiming, it was difficult. If you were kind of in a situation like right here and you wanted to aim at these rocks, you wouldn't be able to get that easily with 8 directional movement because you'd either be at a 45 or like a 0-degree angle here. And I want the player to be able to accurately determine where they're going to throw their bots. Leo, you asked, how are you making your nodes for pathfinding? Right now it's based off of the PICO-8 map. So it's just checking the collision or the collision flag on the map tiles. So I do need to take into account entities, and maybe I make each collision tile an instance of something in the node. I have to be careful about the memory limitations of PICO-8. So I actually ran into issues with that when I was first working on the A-star algorithm. I think that's where this problem was. Oh no, actually I'm thinking of something else. I was running into memory limits when I was building up a foreground layer. Yeah, I am creating a table for each node that I'm traversing. So I'll have to rethink how to do this, and I might need to come up with a simpler representation if I need to represent all of the tiles and entities as nodes on the pathfinding graph. Okay, so collection animation, player collision, player interaction. Let's see, bot spawner, player interaction actually needs to be player enable spawner to be more specific. So yeah, that's something I need to figure out. I don't think I'm gonna have a bot spawn cooldown. If you happen to have multiple supplies reach the little collector at the same time, I think that's okay. I thought about trying to get the bots to queue up, so maybe they kind of line up and wait and drop one supply at a time, but that's again something else for much later. It's not very important. Bot currency doesn't exist anymore. I will need to differentiate between bot types, but I don't have different bot types yet. Bomb bots is one that I want to add. That needs to be up here somewhere. Probably, I guess bomb bots could come after ship parts as far as the game loop. And then I really want to do electric bots and have some little electric puzzles. And maybe you have to throw electric bots in a line and electricity will kind of like jump arc between them. I think that would be really cool. Oops, what did I break? Oh, I actually didn't break anything. If I'm holding a direction when I reload the game, I think certain directions cause it to have an issue. Yeah, because it's detecting input before the player instance is created. That's another little bug. But I have all the important things like a splash screen. I'm missing a lot of sound effects also. So I need sound effects for spawning, for collecting, for spawning. I think the only sound effect that's even in here right now is just this little tick when it hits objects. Music would be good. Let's see, let's add a little bit of collision on these. That's a quick fix. So, I don't know if I want collision on the collector. And actually, let's make... I don't have a function right now to draw collision. I think I want that for debugging. I like to keep all my debug code in one include. That way, once I'm close to being done with the game, I can just remove the include and I save all those tokens. Yeah, PICO-8's cool. I like the restrictions. I like the memory limitations, color limitations, resolution. It's kind of freeing in a way to know that I can't use anything and everything, and it helps me focus a little bit. So let's see, I'm adding debug early on in the process. I'm debating if I want this to come later, which I think I might be able to do. Yeah, I don't think I'm relying on it. The benefit of that is I can add something to another class. So I can say entity.draw hitbox equals function. And then we want to draw a rectangle from, I have a get hitbox function, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So this will give me my X, Y, width, and height. So I can say local HB equals NV get hitbox. And then it's hb.x, hb.y, hb.x plus width minus 1, hb.y plus height minus 1. And I want that to be green. I always forget my color indexes. It's 11. So it shouldn't do anything just yet. Let's see. So in game, I think I'd want to do this at the end. If debug, then actually I'm already looping over all the entities here. Say if debug, then draw draw hitbox. Still shouldn't be anything, but let's go to globals. Actually, we'll go to our debug file and control it there so I can remove it later. There we go. Okay, so now we have visible hitboxes on everything. So this car has a hitbox. 8x8 is my default hitbox, and it's drawing it from its origin position and then to the right and down. The reason why it's not actually colliding with these is I only collide with things that are marked as solid. So if I go to that car is in a class called Rover, and I make it solid, oh, that should be colliding. Oh, two things. Actually, I think the reason why this isn't colliding, I think the hitbox is 0, so I actually don't know why we're drawing that. Yeah, so by default, the hitbox is all 0s. But why am I drawing it that way then? Now I'm forgetting how I implemented entity collision. Axis aligned bounding box. I get the hitbox, and I'm checking my hitbox, or current entity's hitbox, against the other object's hitbox. And get hitbox should be width, height. And by default in an entity, yeah, width and height are 8. Let's see. Let's just say the hitbox is, in this case, it's -16. So it's how far left from the origin, how far right from the origin. So 16. I think it's actually going to need to be 15 in one of these directions. And then up, I would only want it to be -8 pixels, and down would be 0. And then the width and height of this are wrong. So this is actually a 24 pixel wide sprite, and the height is 16 pixels. Oops, I forgot a comma. Okay, so then these are off, and I'm still not colliding. Oh, no, my draw is wrong. Okay, so I'm doing something wrong with my draw, because I am actually colliding now with this shape. And it looks like this would actually be -15. Oh wait, it's not 15. It's 24, so left would be -11 and +12, roughly. Yeah, so that's, the collision's working properly now. I'm detecting the collision between two hitboxes, but it's drawing wrong. And I'm realizing now that all those little boxes that are popping up, those are the potential hitboxes for the dust particles. Okay, so what did I do wrong here? Oh, these should be hitbox width and hitbox height. There we go. That makes more sense. Now it's right. I was drawing the hitboxes to the full sprite width and height, not the defined hitbox width and height. See if I can eliminate some of them by checking for 0. Yeah, there we go. Kind of. So in the case of the cursor, it only collides at the point right in the center, but we're not drawing that little collision point. Likewise with the player. The player only has collision at a single point. See. Yeah, and the cursor isn't considered solid. Okay, I think I would just live with those being on. Maybe I don't do these negatives either. No. I do want the negatives for an accurate representation. I don't want the negatives when the height is different. Width offset equals HP dot width is greater than 0 and -1 or 0. This is how you do a ternary in Lua. So I'm checking if the width is greater than 0, then I want the width offset to be -1. Otherwise I want it to be 0. And I'll do the same thing with height. I'll make this plus width offset plus height offset. There we go. Yeah, it is confusing to see and and or as a ternary like that. It's one of those little tricks that you get used to with PICO-8. Yeah, most languages you might be able to do condition, question mark, true, else false. That's essentially the same thing. Condition and true or false. Okay, got our representation here. Noticing the player is moving over this vehicle. I don't want that. Not sure why it's doing that. Log player dot sort value and give this a reference that I can call g.r.sort value. Oh, interesting. Oh, I'm not updating the sort value. Everything needs to update its own sort value. So I changed the sorting to use a new sort value key, but because the sort value doesn't change on update, it's not actually updating those. So let's go to entity, update, and we need to make this a function. So now what happens if we come up here? There we go. So now we can go behind this vehicle and collide with it. And I think I want to make the hitbox just a little bit taller. So that's 16 pixels tall, make it go -12. So we only ever look like we're walking right behind the wheels. And I want to do the same thing with these other two objects here. So the spawner needs to be solid. And we need a hitbox with the offsets. So from its origin, I want to go -8 to the left, 7 to the right. Probably go -12 again up and 0 on the Y. So now the player can walk just a little bit behind this. And then let's go to the collector. Do the same thing. This one, I only want to go like -6 pixels. Or sorry, left. Left, I want to go -8. Right, I want to go 7. Up, I want -6, and down 0. And I missed a comma. Oh, actually, this one's slightly different because of the way that it draws. I've got the little sort of stair ramp picture at the bottom of that. So it's actually drawing the sprite down from the origin point. So I don't want to go up many pixels at all. What if I just make it 0? What's that do? Then I need to go... Actually, 0 is probably fine there. And then I want to go down a few. Let's say 4. So the interesting thing about this, actually I have a layer, I have a different layer on this one. So because it's set as layer 0, everything will walk on top of it. So maybe I will actually go -1 here and 5. Let's turn the hitboxes off. So now we collide with that with the cursor. The player collides with it. Can we still collect things? Yeah, because these disregard entity collision right now. Cool. I want to expand on that. Let's add the debug feature. Yeah, Anger, it's great working in PICO-8, iterating quickly like this. I'm working on it in an external browser, or an external editor, but I could just be working directly in the PICO-8 file here. As a project gets larger and I start expanding into object-oriented programming and I'm splitting everything up into multiple files, I just like to move outside of the PICO-8 editor. But if I'm spiking something or testing something out, it's nice to be able to work inside the editor and you've got your sprites and everything all in one place. Audio, all of it. I don't do game jams too often. I just don't have time for it. The game that the jam that I'm working on this for is a month-long jam, and even with that, I feel like I'm kind of falling short on the deadline. Jams help motivate me to do something. If I was just working on a game in general, it's a little too easy for me to decide to work on it later, or put it off for a week, and then 1 week becomes 4 weeks, and then I just stop working on it. So at least the jam motivates me to continue working on a project for a set period of time. Weekend jams like Let 'em Dare and Mini Jam and some of those other ones, I've tried to do them, but I can't squeeze in enough time in a weekend. This jam is for the podcast Eggplant. Oops, eggplant.show. So it's a game development podcast if you're not familiar. They do about a monthly game jam, and it's really casual. But I really like that community, and so I occasionally have been participating in these game jams. I don't know if the latest one's actually linked here. Yeah, so there's 5 days left in this one. And the theme is just one, parentheses 100. All the jam themes are based off of episode titles from the podcast. Yeah, this one's very casual. I forgot what I was committing here. Oh, those are the collision boxes. I think? No. Oh no, this is the fix for the layers. Yeah, I'd love to work on games more often, but this at least motivates me to do a little bit every day or so. And then I'm trying to commit to streaming every Wednesday, just so I've got a little more accountability. If people are showing up, talking, asking questions, it keeps me motivated also. Okay, so I've got collision on all these things. I think even though it's not the most important thing to work on right now, I really want to work on the collection animation. So I want something to happen when these little crates get dropped on that platform. And I was starting to set that up here. So I have some tooling set up that I'm using for asynchronous calls. This is a class that I've created that wraps coroutines in PICO-8. So coroutine will, right now it'll execute the coroutine function once per frame. That's all called from main. I call this async update. Async update iterates over each coroutine in my coroutines table. If the coroutine's dead, then it throws it away, deletes the coroutine from the coroutines table. Otherwise, it tries to resume the coroutine, and then it's wrapped in this assert, because without the assert, it can silently fail in PICO-8. So the assertion will make sure it's actually executing that. So, and then I have this wait function, which I must have put in my helpers file. Yeah. So wait just does a for loop for the number of frames and yields each frame. And so that's an easy way for me to say wait for 30 frames, then destroy the supply instance that is dropped on the platform. And then I could do another wait 60 frames, so full second. So I can say that should bring that over there, wait half a second, destroy, and then spawn. But I think I want to, I don't know if I want the initial wait. I'll maybe wait some amount of time. I don't want to destroy this just yet. I want to have some sort of for loop here that does an animation. So I equals 1 to, let's say it takes 2 seconds. Hey, bro, Quaint. What'd you say here? My PICO-8 coroutine utilities and animations are based on my code from Void Protocol. Yes. Yeah, so I'm still working with that logic from that game, but I don't recommend it just because I used up, at least in PICO-8, I used a lot of tokens in that game doing the tutorial with that code. I think I had, yeah, like a tutorial scene. It has multiple steps. Yeah, and I've got these like say functions that are typing out text and then doing different animations. I think all of that used up a lot of tokens. That game maxed out tokens in PICO-8 and it really didn't have a whole lot of content. So I think I like the direction that I'm going in, but I think eventually what I want to be able to do is call something like animate and pass it a string. So you can pass a multi-line string and then have each line be an argument. And so I'd have to have it parse like a simple DSL. So like wait 30, move, and then give it like an X and Y value. And then wait, you know, so I basically make a little language here. And then the nice thing is all of this whole string would just be a single token in PICO-8. So eventually I want to do something like that so I can save all the tokens that I'm eating up with these calls like wait 30. But still, if I was in here, I could see how many tokens this takes. So wait 30 is 3 tokens. We can see that down on the bottom right. And the alternative would be to do for I equals 1, 30, do, and then yield. So by comparison, that's 8 tokens. So it is still shorter, at least in this case, to do wait 30, but there's some things that are taking up a lot of tokens. And if that was, I mean, realistically, I wait and then I do a loop and then I wait and I have other functions like this. If I did this a whole bunch of times, that's 42 tokens. Whereas if it was just a string, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish with this, and a series of things, that whole call is just 3 tokens. So it went from 42 down to 3. But then of course you have to have the trade-off of the code that actually parses your string DSL, and it may not end up being worth it, but it's something I want to explore. Okay, let's see. So I was saying I want to have it drop the supply, wait about half a second, and then my game's running at 60 frames a second. So this 120 frames is going to be 2 seconds. So for 2 seconds, do some sort of animation. Then once the animation ends, maybe wait another 30 frames, destroy the supply. And then probably at that point, I don't want to wait anymore. I want to just spawn the bots. So, don't know what this is yet though. Probably spawning particles. And I think I'm gonna have to change the particle behavior a little bit so I can give it colors. I think my particles are all static colors right now. So I'll spawn at X and Y and give it, I forget, I don't even remember how I did particles. Health? Frames? Oh, frames. So I give the particles a number of frames to exist for, and I give them a X direction, a Y direction. And I do have a color actually. Okay. So direction Y equals -1 and frames equals, let's just say 10. But I probably don't want to do that on each frame. So I want to spawn particles for 2 seconds, but if I mod 10 is equal to 0, then spawn a particle. So every 10 frames, spawn a, oops, hit caps lock. Every 10 frames, spawn a particle. See if I did that right. That was not right. Oh, I'm not yielding. That went too fast. So I need to yield after each loop. Yeah, then a whole bunch of particles spit out and then it spawns. So I kind of want to do that. I think my particles have a radius. Yeah, radius of 1, which is actually going to be like a little plus symbol. So if instead I do a radius of 0, that's a single pixel. So then that would be single pixels being spit out. I think I'm going to want them to be a little more frequent. So we'll do every 5 frames. And we will see from our X position. I'm remembering now the way I set this up. I can't really draw or point my cursor on here. Yeah, you can't see that. Maybe you can see this cursor. Yeah, there's the little red dots in the middle are the origin point. So I want to move from that origin point. I want to say -2 pixels plus a random amount of maybe 4. So we're going to go 2 pixels to the left and then plus a random value of 4. What I'm thinking for the visual effect is sort of like sparks or particles kind of moving up all around the box as it's sort of being collected, consumed, destructured, something along those lines. So then I would also say the Y position is maybe, it should be X minus 2, yeah. X minus 2 plus random 4. This will be Y minus 1 plus random somewhere 3 pixels or so. There should be a little area. And then let's give it a color. And maybe we do a couple colors. So what colors do I have? I'm thinking maybe a blue, maybe kind of blue and orange might look like it's sparkling a little bit. So we'll say 12 and 9. So randomly give us one of these 2 colors for the particle. Kind of. I think the particles move too fast. I don't think I want this wait. I think I want it to start doing this immediately. Seems weird that nothing happens right away. And now I'm realizing I actually want the spacing to be a little bit further because the boxes are like 6 pixels, 7 pixels wide. So let's just go a little bit bigger. We'll double these values. Maybe keep the Y the same for now. It's a little better. I think I need to do something to make the box slowly disappear. Trying to think of how I would do that. I could sort of punch holes in a mask as this timer is counting. I don't know how much time I really want to spend on this effect right now though. What I have so far is better than nothing. Oh, okay, I have an idea. I need to set some value on the supply. I think I'm just going to call it Y clip. And the Y clip is going to be an amount. So let's say Y clip is 0. Fill P and masking. Yeah, that was my initial thought, was something with fill P. I'm not sure if I have an easy way to do that with a sprite, because I don't really want to mask the sprite sheet, because I could fill P this actual sprite, but I'm not sure if I can fill P fill P is fill pattern for anyone else that's following, doesn't understand that. I don't know if I can do a fill pattern on a sprite and mask it. Yeah, because this is observed by the shape methods pset line. Oops, didn't mean to jump to that. Yeah, so I could define a fill pattern. Yeah, I don't know if I could do it with a sprite. I could change the drawing of those sprites. Those boxes are just kind of placeholder for now. The idea was that I was going to have 3 different types of bots, and this would be the standard bot, and then I would have different colors for the different bot types. And I actually don't need all these extra sprites. I could just palette swap one if that's what I'm going to stick with. I could probably just procedurally draw this, and that's essentially a circle. So if I procedurally drew it, then I could fill P, mask it out, and that might work for an effect of sort of dissolving. I'm going to try the idea that I had here real quick though. And it's essentially going to look like looks like it is being sort of absorbed into the platform. I'm just going to draw a portion of the sprite as the timer moves along. So I'm going to use SSPR to get a portion of, or to get the sprite from the pixel values of the sprite sheet instead of the sprite number. So right now I'm drawing sprite 19. Instead I want to draw x24, y8. So I'm going to say 24, 8, and then I think it's width and height, and that is 7 pixels by 7 pixels, and then the position I'm drawing it to, which should be the same. And then I think the next 2 options are the width and height that I'm drawing to. Hey Aaron, welcome in. So let's see. That should work the same. Oh, what did I mess up? I added a comma. Yeah, so I'm still drawing them exactly the same right now, but I'm using SSPR instead of the sprite drawing method. So I want this to have a Y clip value. Y clip was the variable that I was setting up to offset the Y. So how do I want to do that? I start at that position, and then I'm going to change the height that I'm grabbing. So by default, I want 7, maybe minus my Y clip value. And then the Y position is going to have to take into account that Y clip also. So the Y position is going to be plus Y clip. These are both still 0, so that shouldn't do anything. But now I want this, yeah, it's got a supply instance. So as this loop continues, let's see, local percent equals 1 divided by 120, or not 1, I divided by 120. So that'll increase. And so then the supply instances Y clip should equal 7. I can hard code it, or I can use the supply instance dot height. I think it might be better in case I change that sprite. Supply instance dot height times %. So I want the Y clip to be a percentage of the height as the animation progresses. Let's see if I got that right. Yeah, it doesn't look perfect. And there's a little bit of a delay. Do I still have a wait in here? I do, so I am still waiting. So now that it looks like the box is being absorbed into the platform, as soon as I get to the end of this loop, I think I want to destroy that instance and spawn the bots. It's a little better. I think I still want to do something else here. What if I made some of the particles the same color? I'm thinking making them the same color as the little collector. I'm doing good, Aaron. How are you doing? I'm gonna make some of these particles the same as the collector. It's not gonna look right now, but I'm wondering if that would almost look like a mask. Oh, did I use the wrong color? I did. It should be 5. Let's actually make them all 5, just so we can make sure we see that. Oh, I'm doing a random value up to 5. That is not what I want. Do 5 and 13. Yeah, it doesn't really have the right effect. What if we did this every frame? I think more particles looks better. Tanner asks what the intended effect is. I'm just trying to come up with something that makes it look like this resource is being consumed and used to generate bots. I don't really have a specific idea in mind. I'm trying to come up with something that's good enough right now, and I think this might be there. I want it to have a little bit of a delay, so let's actually make these, let's move these boxes. I put them right next to the station so that they were easy to test, but I'll put a couple around a little bit further away. So I want you to be sending a bot to go do something, going off to do another task, and then come back over here, that's dissolving or whatever, being collected. I can send one there, I can send one there, I can send one there. That's going to start spitting out a whole bunch of bots. Yeah, I just want something that makes this look a little more interactive before it spits out a couple of bots. I'm also feeling like the cursor is still a little slow. Yeah, they look like they're being eaten. Yeah, almost like they're just kind of being ground up. I might change this altogether. It works for now for the purpose. I want something to collect some resource and produce bots. And this was a quick thing to throw together. I don't know how else I would try and visualize two separate things. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe having a platform that's separate from the spawner is the issue. Maybe it should be more of a conveyor or something that it makes it look like the resource goes inside this spawner and then the bots pop out. I think that'll have to be V2. I don't know if I love these colors. I think I liked it better when it was a little more colorful. Go back to 9 and 12. Yeah, maybe I'll play around over here for a sec. Get rid of that. Maybe that whole thing goes away. Because I could also imagine this just being like one little thing with like a spot to drop something in. Trying to think how to make this look kind of like a funnel. Yeah, it could be something like this, or more of like a pneumatic tube system, or even these buildings. When I was originally working on this, the idea was to make this a little more elaborate and have these. Why is that not working? Oh, because I have this selected still. Make these a little more interesting and have it be a series of tubes that are connecting buildings. I could do something similar. So instead of the wire that's connecting these, so it just looks like it's plugged into something, it could actually be like pipes or tubes, and this collection thing could actually be a little bit different. Undo these. So maybe part of the problem is that this device isn't interesting enough or intricate enough here. And it should actually be like a larger unit where something's being deposited. I don't know. I think I'm dwelling on it a little too much. Just put that over here. Let's see, we have a collection animation, and that is done. Improve collection animation. So that's something for later. So where are we at now? So a bunch of colorful stuff comes up. I think I would randomize some of these values. So let's say this exists for 6 plus 4 frames, and the Y direction is randomized to 0.5 times -1. I think eventually also color should be an array. And I should be able to say what the color of the pixel is over its lifetime. So it kind of fades through, like that's white, light gray, dark gray, and then disappears. But I need to add that functionality. So as a percentage of its frames, it can change what color it is. Maybe I'll do that right now. It sounds like a fun thing to implement. So let's see. Yeah, it's a bug also that I need to figure out. Actually, I might have solved that. I had an issue with my class implementation. I was missing this line when I first set this up, so that might be fixed. No, still not working. So color. If local C equals env.color. If type C is equal to table, C equals C, and then the index is going to be, how am I tracking this? So I'm not tracking the total frames and the frames separately. I'm just decrementing frames. So I need to store that somewhere. So I'll add an initializer, and maybe we'll call it max frames. So max frames equals frames on initialization. And we actually need to make sure we call the entity initialization also. env is, it's kind of a trick to save me tokens in PICO-8. So I have a video. This object-oriented PICO-8 video. I talk about environments right here. Drop that in there. But essentially, in Lua, if I tried to print, oops, do tiny or puny font mode, env is, you can't see it there. Turn off puny, turn on puny. So env is always a table. So in Lua, everything's a table, even the global environment. So if I were to try and print env dot underscore init, that's a function. So everything you're used to interacting with, btnp, button inputs, these are all functions on the global environment. And what you can do to save yourself some tokens is when you call a function with a colon. So if I did person equals a table, and then person walk is a function, I could call that by doing person.walk. But now if my person walk function needs to change values on the person, so let's say the x value is 0, and I want my walk function to increment that person's position. If I only had one table, I could say person.x plus equals 1 and increment it that way. But now I have to do person.x every time I reference it. So often people might use self as an argument here and a colon. So if you call person.walk with a colon, in Lua, using a colon to call a function is the same as saying person.walk and passing that in as the first argument. So person colon walk would pass in person as self, and then I would have self.x plus equals 1. So a lot of times people will do this. You'll person walk and then self.x plus equals 1. But again, in PICO-8, each self dot reference is a couple of tokens. So if I had that same thing over here, self.x plus equals 1, that's 4 tokens. And then if that was just x equals 1, that saves me 1 token. It's not a lot, but every self dot reference is 1 more token. So if I was doing that a lot in something like my player class, where I'm updating states, I'm updating positions, I guess entity probably has a bit more of that. I do a lot of referencing of values of the current class. So if I had to have self dot all over the place, I'd be using up a lot of tokens. And there's a good chance actually you mentioned void protocol earlier, Brokepoint. I bet I was doing that in here, and that's part of the reason why I ended up using up so many tokens. Yeah. So in this game that I made a little while ago, there's just self dot references everywhere. And so all of these self dot references, every single one of these is 1 additional token that's being used to reference attributes on those objects. So coming back to env, the way this works, if I go back to, let's see, where was I messing with that? Here. So if instead of calling this self, I call it env, what that's actually doing is changing the scope of the global environment within the context of that function. So now if I say x plus equals 1, I'm not changing a global variable x. If it was set up like this, if I had x out here, this env reference is actually going to say this person table is the new global scope for within the context of this function. So by putting env here instead of the word self, I can get rid of this self reference. So I tell my game, while you're executing this function, any bare variable reference, look at the current table first before bubbling up to the global scope. So it's just a trick in Lua and PICO-8 to save tokens. Yeah, the dynamic scoping's tricky, and it can be tough to get your head around. It was really difficult for me to understand at first, and what helped me understand was creating that video that I made. And I still don't get it right all of the time, but it's starting to become a little more second nature, and so I'm able to squeeze a lot more value out of this object-oriented programming approach by using env to save tokens. Okay, so coming back to our particle, I'm getting the local color, and then if the type of that variable is a table, then I actually want C in this scope to equal frame. Actually, we're going the other way around. It's max frames. No, max frames minus frame. So that we get, is this right? Max frames minus frame divided by max frames. So that will start at, let's say it's 30 minus 0. I need to pull this out. Max frames minus frame, I need parentheses around this. So that will start, all right, so frame starts at the max frames. So in this case, it's gonna start at 0. So it's 0 out of 30. So that's gonna give me a percentage. Yeah, roughly. It's giving me a fraction of the max frames. Siri wants to get involved. So that's giving me a fraction of the max frames. So I want to take that and multiply it times the number of C. And then I probably want to floor that. Oops, I was what I was going to put here. I equals percent. So my percentage times the length of C. But that actually needs to be, let's see. I need it to be 1 to 3. So when, and I'm starting at the maximum value. So I'm starting at 1, because max frames, no, I'm not. I got that. I figured that already. So now I'm starting at 0, and I'm going 0 to maximum value 30. So this is a fraction of that. So 0 to 3 potentially, but that's not what I want. I want to go from 1 to 3 in even increments. So it's going to have to be I, or 1 plus floor percent C minus 1 So it's 1 plus percentage times 2. I'll just try that. Oops. Type is not defined. Type a table value. Global type a table value. Ah, because I'm overriding type. Yeah, type is a function here. That's what I want, but I'm actually overriding type in my entity class. I'm not actually using it that many places. I think I'm going to change it. What do I want to call it? Parent prototype class. I might call it class. Okay, so my particles are back. The little dust particles are showing that that's working. Okay, and I'm drawing the colors. So now if I go to my collector and I give these a color ramp. So let's say it starts at 7, then 6, then 5. Let's see if a color ramp works. It did not. Tail my PICO-8 log. First, let's log the type of C. Let's see what we're getting here. So C is a number. And when this starts going, C is a table. Okay, that's what we expect. See what our index is. So it's just always 3. Why is that? Our percent is always 1. Ah, frame. Frame doesn't exist. Does it? Maybe I have a frame. So I'm using frame for animation. So I happen to have a frame variable. I used the wrong variable. I happen to have a frame variable that is always 0. And in this case, frames is actually what I want. So I was subtracting something that was never changing. It's close. It's going from white to gray. And my percent values are changing. But I'm guessing I'm never actually getting to the last value. Yeah, it's just going through 1 and 2. Because if I'm flooring it, I'll never actually get to 3. This is one of those problems that feels like it's probably some basic math that is escaping me, and I'll remember as soon as I stop streaming. Let's see. We're going to go essentially a percentage from 0 to 1. And we actually need that split up in chunks of less than the total count, because we're going to start on 1. And essentially what we want to happen is if percent is greater than, in this case, we're working with 3 values. So if it's greater than 33, I should equal 2. This is just pseudocode at this point. If percent is greater than 66, then I should equal 3. So how do we make that a reality? 1 ends up being the default index. So then, in this case, we're checking for so when we get to 33%, 33% times 2 is going to give us 0.66. It's going to be 1 plus 0.66 floored. How do I make that the value that I want? This is particularly frustrating because I know I've been in this exact position a million times trying to offset some value, and I know I've solved it, but it's escaping me. The answer wouldn't be just to sealing the result, because we'd end up with the opposite problem. We would always be 1 higher. A very familiar problem. I don't know why this sort of thing feels so difficult to reason about. Tanner, tell me the answer. Ask your smart GPT friend. Yeah, that's what I thought. Let's see. I equals 1. And I want to add 1 or 2 based off of the percentage. PICO-8 also doesn't have a rounding function by default, so sometimes I want to round to the nearest number. I'm debating if that's something that I would want in this case. So if I round some value, if value is greater than, if value is less than 0.5, I think that's actually doing what I want. Maybe this is why I run into this problem frequently, because I can't round quickly. I'll log a little bit more to see if it's a about what I want. Actually, that's not, those frames aren't going to be set. Oh, I forgot too, I am setting frames differently. These are only lasting for 10 frames, not 30. Just gonna make one particle here for a sec. Okay, so we gave one particle 120 frames. So it gets to about 90. So it went through 30 frames and then switched, which is a quarter. It's not, for 3 values, we got a quarter of it. And then do we get to 60 and then switch again? Yeah, so it's not quite right. So it stayed the first value for 1/4, the second value for 1/4, and then went to the third value. I wonder if this math is changing it now, because we would round to 0 for a little bit. No, now it's even less, even fewer frames with the initial value. I'm hitting the point where my brain just isn't braining. I'm going to leave that for now. Oops. I want to look at that. I'm going to put that in my to-do. Let's see, we got the player collision. We don't have the player enabling the spawner. I want to recall animation also. See where I left this. Oop. Just the one. Let's fix that. Yeah, take out these conditionals. Put this back to 6 plus a random value up to 4. And this, that's still what I want. I don't love it, but it's something. I can't dwell on it, I'll have to come back to it. Just gonna give this value a name. Make it more specific. Okay. I'm only going to be streaming a few more minutes. Let's see. This recall animation is something I kind of want to do. Maybe I'll do a simple version of that just to get something in. So bots, let's see. Actually, it's in the cursor. Cursor handles recall if I've been pressing button 5 for more than 10 frames. Then the recall radius starts to grow. I don't think I need to do this anymore. I had a to-do comment here to only iterate over on-screen bots, but this circle collision function I've changed to short circuit if something is off screen. Yeah, so then if all these conditions match and the bot has a current target, delete it from there, add it to the player, follow the player, target the player. I think all this needs to be in a method on the bot class. So we will do, in this case, E is the bot. So E.recall, just call it that, and all this should happen. Let's go right above our states. Now we can get rid of these E.dot references because that's inside of this class. Thanks for hanging out, Tanner. See ya. And then we'll add, in this case, we have to use env as a reference. Right up here as well. So we're saying add the current object, delete the current object from this pool, add the current object, change my state to follow, target the player, and then in all of this, I think I want to call an async function. And trying to think of how I want to do this. I want the bots to get like a little exclamation point over the top of them. I don't know if that's going to be too big. Can I make that smaller? What if I did? None of these look like exclamation points without a space, probably. Maybe that. I could probably get away with 3 pixels. And I might just draw that with a line in that case. Or a line in a pset. So async will set a value of alert. So by default, alert equals false. And then, where's my draw? If alert, then I just want to make this really obvious right now. X, Y, radius of 3, I think that's green. So throw the bot, and then if I, oh, nope. Oh, I didn't use my async right. Bot, recall, async, call. So throw the bot, recall the bot. It's misspelled circfill. Try again. There we go. Okay, yeah. So we're drawing a big circle. So I think I want to animate it eventually, so the little exclamation point kind of like pops open when you recall the bot, and then hangs out for a little bit and then collapses down. But for now, I'll make it a little more static. So our asynchronous function is going to set alert to true, wait half a second. I might want to go longer than that, and then set alert to false. So I'm going to throw the bot, recall the bot, and then that goes away. So now I actually want to change the draw. So if it's alerted, then at, let's do a p set first, at its x position, y position, minus its elevation, minus an additional, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's try 6. That's the height of the sprite. I guess I could do the height of the bot because we have a height here. So the height of the bot minus an additional 2. So at that point, draw color 2. Throw the bot, recall the bot. So that's pretty good. And then above that, we actually want a line. So we want to start at the same position. And then we're going to have also still at the X. And then we should save this because we're going to need to use this a few times. Let's call it AY equals that. So then this is AY. And then the line will start AY minus 1. And it will go to AY minus 2. And that we want to be red, which I think is 8. Yeah. So line from x AY minus 1 to x AY minus 2, 8. So we'll throw the bot, recall the bot, we get a little alert for a sec. Let's get some more bots going, test that out. So let's see if I can bring back my spawner logic real quick. No. There it was. Let's just do this. It's actually not bad. And I think I'll add a sound effect on that at some point too. The one thing I'm noticing is I don't think I'm taking into account the Y offset and the X offset. So the bot kind of hovers. It sort of floats around in a circle. And I use sprite offsets for that, I think. So let's go back to bot. So I think I'm going to make an AX variable here, and it's X plus XOX. And this is going to be Y plus OY. So those are my offset values. And then this just needs to be AX. And we probably won't even really notice this, but the exclamation should follow the sprite a little bit closer even when it's hovering. Let's spawn a whole bunch of these guys. Looks like it's off by just a little bit. That could be fractional offsets that I'm not accounting for. When it's moving, it doesn't seem bad. See how annoying it would be to add a little sound to this. I don't think I'm using any of these sound effects. Yeah, I'm just using 0 and 63. Hey, Colbert. I'm just about to wrap up, but I'm trying to add a little sound effect. So I'm testing this little recall animation on these bots. Just giving them a little exclamation mark when you call them. It's the only sound effect I'm actually using is 63 is for my splash screen, 0 is for the little attack tick. So let's see, what would be a good alert? If it's going to happen on a whole bunch of things, I don't know if I want it to be very noticeable even. I think I kind of want like a little high pitch blip. Let's try that. So bot, when we call recall, sound effect 1. Doesn't feel like the right sound, but having something is good. I think something like that where it kind of clips the sound effect. I actually like that better. I don't know if I like how high pitched it goes. Kind of like that. What do you think, like this or back to a little bit higher pitch? Thanks for hanging out, Bro Quaint. I'm going to be wrapping up in a sec here too. It's almost a Yoshi sound effect. I think I'm going to leave it there for today. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thanks for the input. Enjoyed talking everyone through some of my PICO-8 nonsense. I appreciate you hanging out. I'll see you later.